Are rising virtualization costs eating away at your budget? Are you battling uncertainty in your VM estate and spending too much time and energy managing multiple disparate environments? Is your existing virtualization platform keeping you from realizing the benefits of modern advances in cloud computing, AI, and cloud-native development? Do you want to deliver new capabilities to your customers from a trusted, modern platform? Red Hat OpenShift makes VM migration simple with an easy-to-use migration toolkit, while also enabling application modernization with AI and cloud-native capabilities. Its enterprise-grade virtualization, combined with Red Hat Advanced Cluster Management and Ansible Automation Platform, helps you modernize while preserving existing investments. A broad partner ecosystem enhances its capabilities to fit your needs. And with Red Hat OpenShift Virtualization Engine, you get a streamlined, cost-effective solution built for VM management on a platform designed for the future. Imagine a platform that provides a hybrid cloud foundation where you can seamlessly migrate and run VMs using consistent tooling that empowers application modernization, integrating AI and cloud-native development, manages and automates the lifecycle of VMs at scale using curated content and efficient workflows, and ensures consistent operations with real-time visibility into VM health and compliance. Not sure where to start? Red Hat Professional Services can help. Our experts work closely with your team to develop a low-risk migration plan and execute it seamlessly, so you can simplify management, boost resiliency, and reduce maintenance to minimize disruption. It's time to take control of your virtual machines. Migrate with confidence today while preparing for the future through a scalable, modern infrastructure platform to drive workload innovation. Let Red Hat help you reduce operational costs, innovate fiercely, and modernize on your own terms. Learn more. Contact us today.
Virtualization strategies can be difficult from beginning to end if you don't have the right partners. If you don't know all your options, it can be a struggle to migrate existing applications to your new environment, and harder still to keep track of costs. This is a special edition of the IT Pro podcast. In this episode, in association with Red Hat, I'm joined by Ed Hoppett, Director of Business Value Practice at Red Hat and a long-time virtualization veteran, to discuss how Red Hat can act as a catalyst for reduced IT cost. Ed, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me.
So to start with, how would you describe OpenShift virtualization for those who might not be aware of the offering?
So look, virtualization has been a backbone of the IT industry for 25 years. The idea of reducing your dependency on physical infrastructure by virtualizing the servers you're going to run is something that now underpins almost everything that runs in IT today. OpenShift virtualization is Red Hat's answer to how you can deploy those virtual workloads in a new way. And it builds upon OpenShift as a platform, which is well known in the industry. It's a leading container platform for people building containerized workloads. And what it does is it takes all of the amazing potential that it has and allows it to run virtual machine instances in just the same way that it runs containers today.
So how would you describe an ideal future virtualization strategy for those who might be considering this move from traditional VMs?
So look, the traditional VM and the technology that underpinned it was built to solve a bunch of problems that we had 20 years ago. Those problems were that the applications didn't understand what happened if someone pulled the power cable out the back. The applications were fragile and they relied on the infrastructure underneath them for reliability. And I can remember, 20 years ago, just trying to patch the BIOS on a server was a massive effort because you'd have to try and find a way of moving the SQL Server instance from one server to another server. And that was planning and project management. And it was probably a 6 or 8 week job. And all you got at the end of it was a patched BIOS. Like, we've forgotten those days because we're so used to being able to move workloads around seamlessly. But that's where the history of virtualization lay. Its focus was, how do I provide heavy lifting efforts to provide super availability for an application layer? Today, modern applications are being written using containers, right? Super lightweight, ephemeral. The idea is that you can restart containers, you can build them at scale, you can scale them easily. And so you end up with a much better application experience and a much better developer experience. So the trick is, how do I find a way of leveraging what my legacy virtual machines are still going to require and require for some time, whilst having a platform that also enables me to run those modern workloads? And there's a number of vendors in the industry that are providing platforms that will do both VMs and containers. But to answer your question of which one would I want to pick going forwards, I think the question is, do I want a platform that was built around solving the legacy challenges of virtual machines that might have had containers bolted on as an afterthought and take that as my platform forward? Or do I want to pick a platform that was built today with the DNA of containers that's going to take me as my platform forwards into the industry that can also bring those legacy VMs with me? And so, my view is that what people should be looking for today is a container platform that is also a virtual machine platform, as opposed to a virtual machine platform that has containers added onto it. And that sounds like a really subtle distinction, but the DNA of those two platform approaches live in two completely different decades of our IT evolution.
You've painted quite a stark timeline there. In 2025, what ways can VM management still be a struggle for businesses?
I think the thing about VM management, right, is that whilst we've abstracted away a lot of the challenge of managing the infrastructure underneath, what's not gone away are the challenges of managing virtual machines at scale. So if you're an organization and you're used to container technology, the idea of managing operating systems, patching operating systems, looking after them, role-based access control, these are all things that you don't do because you just don't have that big surface to look after. For the heavy lifting applications that live within VMs, the challenges of fleet management, patching, management, upgrades, security, those still exist. And so you've got to make sure that you have a way of being able to deliver for those challenges and understand how you're going to manage them, as well as being able to provide for like higher level services that you're going to get on a container platform, like Red Hat's OpenShift.
So expanding on that a little, based on your experiences and your conversations with clients and customers, what do you see as the biggest challenges in today's IT environments when it comes to this management and this virtualization?
So the big challenge, and in a way it's the elephant in the room, right, is that there have been huge changes to the commercial landscape that have affected the price points that people are able to buy these platforms to run their virtualized environments on. I was with a bank in the Middle East last week, and they've seen a 4x increase in cost. I've worked with other organizations that have seen even higher jumps, and it's not necessarily the cost that's increased, but the way that some of these commercial things are packaged has meant that the overall amount you're paying has gone up, and suddenly you're found in a really difficult position, because it's like, well, I still have to run these workloads. They've been in my industry for 20, 25 years. How do I handle that? And so what you find is this delicate balance where your cost base has been transformed. I need to keep the lights on. I also need to find a way of mitigating that problem into the future. And so the commercial challenges that we now see people grappling with is, where do I spend my budget, right? Do I just save all my pennies up, effectively suck it up and go and pay the higher cost that I'm now being faced with? Or do I look to build a 1, 2, 3 year plan that says, okay, so before it was okay to pave this legacy technology over all of my estate. That's what I did. It was just a policy. You often heard people talk about, I just have a virtualization first policy. I'm going to run virtualization everywhere. And it wasn't the wrong thing to do, right? Because those legacy platforms came at a great price point. They worked, and they were sold by companies who were really great to do business with. As that changes, people have to reevaluate that. And so the challenge today is, how do I keep the lights on, build a migration strategy, and how do I build a dual vendor strategy? And I think it's that last piece, right? What people are doing is they're working out how to build a dual vendor strategy. They're working out, where do I get value from the legacy I invested in, and where will I get value from modern platforms like OpenShift? And so what you really end up with is leaders are answering for one really simple question, and that's, what should I run where, how, and why? right? So the what becomes what's my portfolio of applications look like. The where is, do I run at edge? Do I run in data center? Do I run in the cloud? The how is, what's the platform going to be? And the why is the commercial why around ensuring it's all correct. It makes sense. It's the right decision. And from Red Hat's perspective, what we're seeing is that more and more OpenShift is becoming the answer to that question. From a value perspective, from a technology perspective, and from a capability perspective. If you can offer, in fact, just before I came to this interview, I was doing a piece of work with a customer, and they were going to see almost a 70% saving on what they're paying for their platform. And so for them, it's like, okay, well, the legacy platform still has some value for some niche workloads. We're going to keep it for that. But for the other 80% of what we're doing, I want to recognize, and I want to be able to see that 70% cost transformation.
So we've talked about OpenShift virtualization quite a lot so far. It's built on open source. I was wondering if you could explain what this means from a customer perspective and what the main benefits of this are.
So this is really key, right? So the majority of platforms that have been out there to date for running virtualization have been closed source. They've been proprietary. And actually, what's really interesting is that the virtualization industry is one that's really had a major player in it that's been there for the majority of the time. And they've run a pretty tight ship in the closed source business. And so when we go and have first contact conversations with customers around what it means to run OpenShift and to run our virtualization technologies, actually one of the first conversations we end up having is, what does it mean to strategically pivot to sourcing from open source? Because it's a big change. How we build the software is different, right? So the idea that we're investing in and curating in upstream projects, we're being the enterprise lens on the landscape of those projects in the CNCF, and going, right, okay, we understand enterprise customers. What are the projects that are the right projects and are going to deliver the right capabilities for what an enterprise customer wants? And then it's Red Hat's job to work out how we assemble those and orchestrate those into a platform that's going to deliver it. And so what that means for a customer is that transparency of what we're doing is there, right? You can see these projects, you can see the roadmap for the projects. If you're a customer, you can even contribute to them, right? So rather than it being a closed book, closed shop, you're suddenly in a world where you can see and influence direction and strategy, right? So that explains the difference in how we build the software and how the sausage factory works, how we make it. But there's also a really key difference in terms of what that means in terms of holding us to account. So because what we build is open, because what we build is has its roots in the community, and there are very often community versions that you don't pay anything for of the technologies that we use, it's simply not possible for us to do the kind of price hikes that some of these other vendors have done. Because if I price hike the subscriptions for my flavor of this particular package, there's nothing stopping a customer going, well, you know what, I'm not paying that. I'll go and use the community version. I'll go and use the open source version. And I can get 20, 30, 50 companies to provide me with support on that. Yeah. And so the second pillar of why open source makes such a difference here is it holds us to account. And it means that you've got confidence in how we're going to transact and confidence in how we're going to interact with you. And if I'm allowed a third one, if the first pillar is how we build it, the second pillar is the commercials, the third pillar is about employee engagement and retention, right? It is far more interesting and exciting to go and hire someone and tell them they're going to be able to give back. They're going to be able to contribute to this tech. They're going to be able to influence the direction that technology is going directly. And often that's part of like a sustainability goal for a company is actually, what element do I give back? Mm-hmm. Well, it turns out that giving back to code is giving back to the community. And so there's actually a third piece, which is that getting the talent and keeping the talent turns out it's much easier if you can allow that talent to shine and actually contribute to building the platforms that are running the world.
That paints a very clear picture of where OpenShift fits in on a company-by-company basis. I'm wondering if, in the long term, you could explain where does OpenShift virtualization sit for a company's long-term strategy?
So initially, what we're seeing most companies doing, and a great example of this was Emirates, NBD, they're a large bank in the UAE. So they used OpenShift. Their first contact, if you want, with OpenShift was as a container platform. And over a couple of years, I think they scaled that to around running sort of 30, 40,000 containers. And then the changes in the landscape happened. And so they were going, well, what are we going to do? What are our options? And so they've been on this journey already. So they're running ahead of the pack. And initially they had a dual running period, right? So for that, what it meant was they were going to be running their alternate platform alongside their legacy platform. And that was about education, understanding, getting people up to speed and championing the successes of the first migrations as they started to move workloads over. And the successes could be anything from lines of business seeing lower cost to greater developer efficiency and agility in terms of how you can interact with the platform. Then what they're doing, so there's two sides to it, right? There's what I call divert the flow, which is what they were doing. And divert the flow is the first thing that they focused on was every net new workload we're going to put on the new platform, right? So everything new goes on the new platform. It's really obvious why. You don't want to make your old problem any bigger. And you don't want to have to double handle stuff. So if I'm going to do a migration at some point, I don't want to land on the old platform and then migrate to the new. I'll just put it on the new. Yeah. So divert the flow is like the first stage. Once you've got divert the flow going, then you can do what I call drain the lake. So in parallel with that, the next piece of that experience of running the virtualization platform is I start pulling across using migration technology, the legacy VMs into that new environment. And so now I'm left with the legacy VMs on the legacy estate that probably there for good reason, right? The technology in some of these legacy platforms is there to support heavy applications that have a legacy of 20 years ago. But you've now got your 80% running on top of your virtualization platform. What's super cool about the OpenShift platform, though, is that because the DNA is containers, you are automatically in the right place to be able to then start to look at that estate and figure out how to modernize it. And that's where you can start to see the huge gains in agility, gains in cost, gains in flexibility of management. And so it's almost like the virtualization platform evolves into being the platform that you can then containerize those applications on, focus on smaller, lightweight chunks of application, and be able to drive the business at greater speed. And the great thing about OpenShift is that it's a single platform. It's a single code base, right? So whether you're using a subscription that we call OVE, which is the OpenShift virtualization engine, I refer to that as just enough OpenShift to run VMs. Like all it'll do is run VMs. And then imagine that you've got a use case where, 10 years ago, my application updates arrived on a CD. Now they arrive in a container. So I just want containers for packaging, like my ISV sending me the new applications as a container. So we have OKE, OpenShift Kubernetes engine, and that's just containers. And then as you go up, you have OPP, and eventually you have the ability to run things like Red Hat, OpenShift AI. But it's all one platform. It's all one code base. All that changes is your entitlement to what you can run on it. And so what we see is these virtualization platforms very quickly evolve because the customer realizes I've got one platform. I can deploy my containers onto it, my VMs onto it. I can use it for the workloads of tomorrow. And so that's what Emirates MBD are using, right? They've now migrated all of their production VMs onto the OpenShift virtualization platform. That's running on the same platform, on the same hosts alongside their existing container estate. And it was great. I was with Nick, who's the VP for Cloud and Data at Emirates. I was with him a couple of weeks back. And they're already now looking at how do they make that their application platform for their AI workloads going forwards. Oh. Because it just makes sense. Yeah. Modern applications, modern futures, modern platform.
You gave a list of different options there for how much you want to embrace the platform or not. One of the common pitfalls for organizations who are looking to embrace a new platform is that they unintentionally increase their complexity. So how is Red Hat ensured that this isn't a concern for customers who are looking to embrace OpenShift virtualization? So
I think the first thing that causes complexity in IT, and I've long said that we're great at this, is the concept of the silo, right? And so there is nothing more complex than a customer who has a platform to run VMs on and a platform to run containers on. Two teams, two sets of tools, two different worlds. And those worlds, when they collide, is just a catastrophe. It's a mess. So the easiest way to compress complexity out of that is to bring things down to a single platform. If it happened to be a single platform that was built on a bunch of open standards, that there's a huge amount of understanding and expertise on, there's a huge amount of talent readily available on, that there's an open community that you can go and learn from. And if you were then to use all of the same APIs, standards, and methods to deploy everything, whether it's an AI workload, a container, or a VM, What you're really driving through moving to a modern platform like OpenShift is this sort of idea of ruthless standardization, right? I can standardize on how I instantiate things. I can standardize on how I manage things. I can standardize on how I run things. And I haven't actually had to change anything. I've just moved to a new way of operating. And when you look at the ability for OpenShift to scale fast in a customer, the reason that we see it grow quickly is because it is perceived as being really simple to use, right? It's, is it the same? Does it operate the same way as maybe a legacy virtualization platform? No, it doesn't. It's different. It's built on containers. Does that mean it's complicated? No, it just means it's different. And so one of the things that we've been investing really heavily in is to help the people with the legacy skill sets around the legacy virtualization platforms understand, well, that's what my task would have looked like in my old tooling. Well, that's what my task looks like in the new tooling. Yeah. And, there's probably I can probably boil it down to 10 or 15 really simple use cases represent 80% of what an admin's going to do. And so if you could help them understand how that's going to operate in the new world, their world quickly becomes pretty simple. And on top of that, their remit grows because suddenly they're not just the container person or the VM person, they're the platform person, and they suddenly understand how to manage platforms at scale and what that means. Most of in fact, all of the customers that I've spoken to have said that moving to one way of doing everything and having that simple standards open approach, it simplifies everything from scaling to talent acquisition to management to the data operations.
On that point of the plethora of different use cases, I was wondering if there are any other customer cases that you think would be valuable to mention here, or specific use cases that you see coming up frequently.
At the moment, the biggest use case is I've got a massive bill and I need to transform the cost of my budgeting for next year. That is by far the number one use case. And I think we're going to continue to see that for some time, right? That initial sticker shock of seeing something that's been a very predictable behavior for 20 years changing overnight has had a huge impact on the industry. And, if you're going to pull the value lever that hard and change the maths that much, that's going to drive a whole bunch of different behaviors. I think the other use case that we're now seeing coming on stream is, and in a way it's even more legacy, is the virtual desktop workloads. So just a couple of weeks ago, we announced a partnership with Citrix where we're going to enable people to run those traditional VDI-based workloads on top of their OpenShift platform. Another completely different use case that, if you'd asked me 5 years ago, are people going to be running VDI workloads on the leading container platform, I would have said, no, that's clearly never going to happen. But now you can bring those workloads as well and benefit from the same price point. And then I think the third use case that I'm seeing is where you've got those hybrid applications. So where a customer wants to have, the enterprise class container platform running the modern parts of their applications, and they want them sitting alongside the traditional legacy VMs, and that has to exist as one application. And you want to be able to deploy that as one thing. I think that's the other big third use case that I'm seeing that's drawing people to the platform.
We've rightfully talked about the platform in some detail, but zooming out a bit to look at Red Hat, how does Red Hat step in as a trusted partner along the way?
So there's a couple of angles to where Red Hat's trust comes from. I think the majority of it stems from the fact that we are driven by the community, right? So we invest in and we work with the community, and the community underpins everything that we do. You can't maintain a good relationship with the community without having trust, and that trust then flows through the trust supply chain, if you want, right? We're a very open company. We're a very transparent company. If you want to get a roadmap from us and you want to understand the direction, it's all out there. You can see it. And so there's no surprises. Nothing suddenly pops up and we go, ta-da, but you didn't see that coming. But what that means is that we're able to sit down and very openly help build long-term strategy with customers. You can see where we're going. You can influence it. As I said earlier, you can contribute to it. And so that gives us a really easy position to be seen as those trusted people. I often talk about sort of a pyramid in the open source space. And we have the community, who are the incredible people that invest time building this technology. And a subset of that community are the users. So they're people who are taking those projects and running them. A subset of those users are customers, people who might want to pay money for support, for education, for service. Yeah. And then a subset of those customers are those people that have opinions in the companies that we do business with, that sit right at the top. And I think wherever you sit on that layer, Red Hat maintains a really great relationship, whether it's world-class customer service, world-class customer experience for the products that we make, whether it's providing incredible customer experience for our customers, end customers, or just the amazing stuff that we do supporting the community and giving the community the opportunity to share the incredible work that they do, in building the technologies that massive global companies are now building their IT estates on.
So, of course, none of us can tell what's coming around the corner, but in conversations with IT leaders, what would be your recommendations for when they're considering their virtualization strategies?
So at the moment, most people are finding themselves considering their strategies under pressure, under duress, because something's changed. And so my first piece of advice would be stop, pause and breathe. Making decisions under pressure is never the right way to do it. I was talking to a telco a while back, and they saw a 7x increase in their costs because they panicked. They found themselves in a difficult position under commercial pressure. They were worried that support was going to be withdrawn if they didn't agree to things, and they were worried that critical national infrastructure could potentially go out of support. What they hadn't understood was they had options. And so that would be my piece of advice. Use that time to explore those options. Plan ahead. Don't wait for the train wreck to happen. Think in advance. What steps will I need to take? How long might it take me to migrate? How would I build a plan around that? What's involved in doing that? And so for that, you need education. And one of the things we're great at Red Hat is sharing our knowledge. And so my ask would be, get yourselves along to one of the Summit Connect events that we're holding all across Europe, in major cities. I'm attending in London and a couple of others. And you can meet the experts. You can talk to Red Hatters who have helped guide customers through those decisions that you're now trying to understand how to make. You will be able to hear from customers who will tell you how they successfully made those migrations, what's happened as a result of transforming their estate, and the cost benefits that they're seeing, as well as the agility benefits and what have you. But yeah, stop, pause, think, and make a good decision.